I leaned back in my chair, staring at the blank document on my computer screen. The cursor blinked impatiently, as though urging me to produce some semblance of inspiration. But my mind was far from my work. It drifted back to the beginning, to the first time Evan had deployed again, leaving me adrift in a hollow space filled only by loneliness. First, it was innocent enough. I'd go to the local cafe for a change of pace. Helping the gentle hum of voices and the clinking of coffee cups might spark something within me. That's where I met Henry. Henry had a rugged confidence and a warm, inviting smile that made it easy to open up. Around him, our conversations began innocently, just casual exchanges over cappuccinos. But soon enough, the chemistry between us was undeniable. One evening after the cafe had closed, we shared a bottle of wine. From there, well, one thing led to another. Then there was Daniel. If Henry was like a sudden, unpredictable summer storm, Daniel was a brooding thundercloud on the horizon, dark and intense. We crossed paths at an art exhibit downtown, and he had an air of mystery that practically beckoned me to lean in and uncover every hidden piece of him. Around him, I felt a thrilling sense of vitality, electrified by his dark past and softly whispered secret. It made me feel emotions I hadn't experienced in years, emotions I didn't even realize I was capable of. Finally, there was Theo. Theo, so young, so brimming with enthusiasm. It was like a puppy-like charm with his bright, admiring eyes. Every morning he'd walk past my house, casting quick glances up, almost as if he hoped to catch a glimpse of me. One day, he saw me struggling with bags of groceries and rushed over to help. His hand brushed against mine, and I saw that barely concealed longing in his eyes. It was thrilling, even reckless, but I couldn't deny how good it felt to be wanted. My life had taken these uncharted paths, and they had all collided in ways both exhilarating and terrifying. One night, somehow, all three of them ended up in my bedroom. It was pure chaos, thrilling, dangerous, irresistible chaos that I couldn't pull myself away from. Henry's strong, rough hands, Daniel's penetrating gaze, Theo's boundless energy. It was all-consuming, and still, somehow, never enough. "You okay?" My friend Amber's voice snapped me back to the present. "Oh yeah, just a bit of a creative block," I lied, forcing a smile. The truth was, the memories of those nights still lingered, like shadows that wouldn't fade. I could almost feel Henry's touch ghosting along my skin. Hear Daniel's whispered promises. Feel Theo's eager energy. They each filled a part of me, and yet they left behind deeper echoes of guilt and fear. Amber handed me a latte, her eyes studying me closely. "You seem like it's more than just a creative block. Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not just work stress. And the baby?" I said, leaning on the excuse I always used. It was the one explanation no one questioned. Not even Evan. Just the thought of him felt like a sharp pang in my chest. He was miles away, physically and emotionally. Those deep green eyes of his, eyes that had witnessed so much, now felt unreadable. Like there was a wall between us. Our Skype calls had become more routine than real. The love was there, I think, but the distance had turned everything into a blur. I couldn't erase those nights. I couldn't forget Henry's quiet laughter, Daniel's enticingly dark voice, or Theo's breathless eagerness. And honestly, a part of me didn't want to forget. Each of them had returned fragments of myself I'd long lost to the routine and isolation of being an army wife. "Have you spoken to Evan recently?" Amber's question pulled me back again. Concern mingled with curiosity in her tone. "Yeah, last night I lied once more. In reality, it had been days since we talked. He's good, just worried about me and the baby. Like always. What about you?" Amber pressed gently. "How are you holding up?" I took a slow sip of my latte, buying myself a moment to answer. One day at a time, But it wasn't just about getting by. It was about holding it all together. The house, the baby, the lies. I lived each day teetering between reality and those stolen moments. Each whispered promise with Henry. Each lingering touch with Daniel. Each breathless glance from Theo. They were like double-edged swords, sharp enough to wound, yet never enough to break me completely. "Hey, how about a girls' night?" Amber suggested, her eyes lighting up. "Just you and me. Some wine and terrible movies." "That sounds perfect," I replied, being a glimmer of relief. Maybe if I could ground myself in the normalcy of Amber's company, the tangled web I'd woven wouldn't feel so suffocating. Weeks slipped by in a blur of diapers, freelance deadlines, and the occasional text from Evan. He noticed something was off. Of course he did, but he was too distant, too caught up in his own world to truly understand. The first time all three men ended up together with me was a night seared into my memory. It started innocently enough, a few after-hours drinks at Henry's Cafe. The place was quiet, empty, except for the hum of the fridge and the low murmur of our voices. Henry, with his intense eyes and thoughtful expressions, poured our drinks. Daniel's laughter cut through the silence, a dark edge to it that made my spine tingle, while Theo leaned in, his hand casually brushing against mine. As the night wore on, the air grew thick with an unspoken tension. I saw it in the way they exchanged glances. Something dark, something hungry. It was as though they were communicating without words, deciding my fate right in front of me. The thrill of their attention sent electric shivers through me, though a pang of guilt nibbled at the edges of my conscience. "Monica, why don't you show us some of your designs?" Henry's voice broke the tension momentarily. I fumbled with my phone, pulling up my work, feeling exposed, though not solely because of my art. "This is incredible," Theo murmured, his gaze lingering on me a beat too long. Daniel just smirked, sipping his drink. "Thanks," I managed, my voice barely steady. "It's my escape, I guess." The conversation shifted effortlessly, but the undercurrent of desire remained, growing stronger with every word. Just when I thought I might burst from the tension, Henry stood and gestured toward the back room. "Maybe we should continue this somewhere more private." My heart hammered in my chest, yet I couldn't find the will to refuse. The three of them looked at me with such intensity that resistance felt pointless. We moved to the back room, Henry locking the door behind us. The dim lighting cast shadows along the walls, adding a surreal quality to the moment. They closed in around me, their desire palpable, and my pulse quickened. Henry was the first to touch me, his fingers tracing along my cheek. Daniel's hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer, while Theo's breath brushed against my neck. A wild blend of fear and exhilaration surged through me. I knew I should stop, should walk away, but I was powerless to resist. Their collective desire was overwhelming, disarming, igniting something primal within me. The guilt whispered at the edges of my mind, but the intensity of the moment was too consuming. For once, I wasn't under judgmental eyes. I was in the gaze of men whose eyes burned with want. By the end, I was left breathless, body trembling and mind spinning. It was a blur of sensation and emotion, a whirlwind that left me feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Despite the lingering guilt, I couldn't deny the satisfaction. Raw and untamed, after that night, there was no turning back. Our encounters grew more frequent, more intense, more reckless. I'd catch myself daydreaming, imagining Henry's rough touch, Daniel's gentle caress, and Theo's unabashed passion, even in the most mundane moments, like waiting in line at the grocery store or during client meetings. Each man's distinct energy kept me hooked, like an addict craving the next hit. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Henry texted, "Meet me at the cafe after close." I bit my lip, glancing at the clock, and before I could talk myself out of it, I replied, "I'll be there in 30. When I arrived, the cafe was dim, chairs stacked on tables, the rich scent of espresso lingering in the air. Marcus locked the door behind me, his eyes already clouded with a look of raw desire. He didn't say a word, simply guiding me to the back room, where Henry and Theo were already waiting. The intensity of having all three of them together was like a storm, a symphony of passion and unspoken power. Occasionally, we'd escape to Daniel's secluded cabin. Hidden deep within the woods, the place felt straight out of a suspense novel, isolated and shielded from curious onlookers. One sweltering afternoon, we met there, the fresh scent of pine blending with sweat and the earthy aroma of the forest. "You're late," Daniel greeted, a mischievous glint in his eye. He ran his hand down my arm, his touch igniting a spark. Theo was already stretched out on the worn leather couch, watching us with a knowing smirk. "Guests will have to make her pay for it," he said, his voice thick with anticipation. The cabin became our hidden world, each corner holding memories of intense, forbidden moments. Sometimes we didn't even make it inside. Other times we had to improvise. Theo's car, a small, cramped yet somehow intimate space, provided a quick escape for our stolen encounters. One rainy afternoon, he picked me up from work, and the pounding of the rain on the roof masked our whispered exchanges and soft gasps. When I looked over afterward, Theo's hands clutched the steering wheel, his knuckles white as the adrenaline pulsed through us both. Amber, my friend, wasn't oblivious either. Her eyes would narrow as I showed up late to our coffee dates, my hair slightly disheveled and a faint flush in my cheeks. "Monica, what's going on? You seem different," she remarked one day, studying me carefully. "Oh, just busy with work?" I replied, shrugging off her concern and avoiding her knowing gaze. But deep down, I knew she was starting to see through my act. It felt inevitable, as though my double life was on a crash course with reality. Yet, even the fear of being found out couldn't compete with the magnetic pull of the excitement. It was reckless, but it consumed me completely. Then one evening, everything changed. I stared down at the pregnancy test in my hand, my heart hammering against my chest. 2 lines, positive. No, 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 I whispered, rummaging frantically through the bathroom cabinet for another test. There had to be a mistake. It couldn't be happening. Not now. I found another box, tore open with trembling hands, and 5 agonizing minutes later, I was faced with another set of pink lines. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall, sinking to the cold tile floor. Jack had only been home for a few weeks. We'd been so focused on reconnecting, on making up for lost time, that I'd shoved thoughts of Henry, Daniel, and Theo to the back of my mind. "But now, Monica, are you okay in there?" Jack's voice sounded from outside the door, laced with concern. My heart lurched and I scrambled to my feet, shoving the tests into the trash and covering them with tissues. "Yeah, I'm fine," I called back, wincing at the shaky pitch of my own voice. "Just feeling a little nauseous. Must have been something I ate. Want me to get you some ginger ale?" He offered. "No, it's okay. I'll be out in a minute." I turned to the sink, splashing cold water on my face in a desperate attempt to calm my racing thoughts. How was I supposed to figure this out? The timing, it could be Jack's, but it could just as easily be Henry's, Daniel's, or Theo's. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and opened the bathroom door. Jack was waiting in the hallway. Concern etched across his face as he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "You look pale." I leaned into his touch, guilt twisting like a knife in my stomach. "I'm fine, really. Just tired, I guess." He pulled me into a comforting hug, and I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. How could I have let it come to this, betraying him, betraying us? "Why don't you lie down for a bit?" Jack suggested gently, "I'll make us some dinner." Jack said, his tone warm and comforting. I nodded, afraid to speak, and curled up on the bed, trying to pull myself together. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Henry. "K, beautiful. Miss you. When can we get together?" K, I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with unshed tears. How had things spiraled so far out of control? I typed out a quick response. K, right now Jack's home. K, before I could set my phone down, it buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. K, this weekend, just you and me. K, a wave of nausea hit me. I couldn't keep doing this, not now, not with. I couldn't even let myself finish that thought. Saudi, K replied, then turned off my phone. The next few weeks blurred together. I tried to act as though nothing was wrong around Jack, but constant nausea and overwhelming fatigue made it difficult. His attentive, caring gestures only deepened my guilt. I managed to avoid Henry, Daniel, and Theo for a while, using excuses about work and family, but they grew increasingly persistent. Their messages became more frequent, more pressing. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I nearly collided with Theo in the parking lot. "Monica," he said, his voice low and intense, "we need to talk." I glanced around nervously. "Theo, I can't, not here." He reached out, gripping my arm. Not harshly, but firmly enough that I flinched. "You've been avoiding me, avoiding all of us." "What's going on?" I pulled away, my heart racing. "Nothing. I've just been busy." "Busy?" He scoffed. "Something's changed." "Is it Jack? Did he find out?" "No," I answered quickly, a little too quickly. Theo's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing in them. "Then what is it?" He stepped closer, and his familiar cologne stirred memories I was trying hard to bury. "You can't just cut us off, Monica. Not after everything." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "I have to go," I whispered, brushing past him and practically running to my car. As I drove home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I couldn't keep this up much longer. The stress was eating me alive. When I arrived home, Jack was waiting with a huge grin on his face. "Hey, beautiful," he said, pulling me into a warm kiss. "I've got a surprise for you." He led me to the spare room, which we've been using for storage. He closed the door and had me cover my eyes. Okay, you can look now. I opened my eyes and gasped. The room was transformed. Soft yellow walls surrounded a beautiful white crib. Against one side, a cozy rocking chair was nestled in the corner, and vibrant animal prints adorned the walls. I don't understand. I stammered, my heart pounding. Jack's smile wavered. I know you've been feeling off lately. And I found the pregnancy tests in the trash. He took my hands in his. Why didn't you tell me? Monica, this is amazing news. The room spun, and Jack's face blurred as tears filled my eyes. He mistook them for tears of joy, pulling me into a tight embrace. We're going to be parents, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I can't wait to meet our little one. I clung to him, sobbed, racking my body, as guilt and fear overwhelmed me. Jack stroked my back soothingly, murmuring words of love and excitement. But all I could feel was the crushing weight of my secret. The following months became a nightmare. Jack was overjoyed about the pregnancy, constantly discussing names and future plans. I tried to mirror his enthusiasm, but my secret was like a heavy stone I carried with me everywhere. Meanwhile, Henry, Daniel, and Theo grew increasingly insistent, their messages alternating between concern and anger. I knew I couldn't avoid them forever, but I was completely lost on how to handle everything. One rainy afternoon, I was at the grocery store when I suddenly bumped into Daniel. His face looked tired, his usual confidence replaced by something darker. More desperate, Monica, he said, his gaze moving down, stopping on my swollen belly. Jesus, I instinctively wrapped my arms around myself, as though I could hide the evidence. Daniel, is it mine? He interrupted, his voice barely more than a whisper. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't know, I admitted, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his expression torn between anger and a flicker of hope. You don't know. How can you not know? It's complicated, I said weakly. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Complicated. That's what you're going with. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Does Jack know about any of it? I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. Please, Daniel, I can't talk about this here. Then where Monica? He demanded, his eyes flashing with hurt and anger. You can't just vanish on us, then reappear pregnant. We deserve answers. I knew he was right. They all did. But what answer could I possibly give that wouldn't shatter everything? I need time, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Please, Daniel's gaze bore into me for a long moment. Then he nodded curtly. Fina, but this isn't over. As he walked away, I leaned against the shelves, struggling to catch my breath. My phone buzzed again, a message from Henry. Asterisk, we need to talk. All of us, no more excuses. Asterisk, I closed my eyes, feeling the walls close in. There was no way out. No matter what I did, someone was going to get hurt, and I knew it was all my fault. That night, lying in bed next to Jack, his hand resting protectively over my stomach, I felt like I was drowning. The baby kicked, a reminder of the innocent life caught up in my tangled web of lies. I love you, Jack murmured, already half asleep, his words soft and genuine. Both of you. I turned away, silent tears wetting my pillow. How had things gotten so far out of hand? And how could I ever hope to fix it? Hours later, I looked down at the tiny bundle in my arms, my heart storming with conflicting emotions. The pain of labor still pulsed through my body, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. 15 hours of agony had brought me to this moment, but I was far from ready. Jack stood by the window, his back turned to me. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft coos of our newborn. Our newborn. The words tasted bitter on my lips. Jack, I whispered, my voice hoarse from hours of strain. Jack, please look at me. He turned slowly, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. His gaze moved between me and the baby, and I saw the exact moment the truth dawned on him. The shock in his eyes struck me like a physical blow. Monica, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And what have you done? I clutched the baby closer, as though I could shield us both from the tidal wave about to crash. Jack, I can explain. Explain. His voice rose, hurt and anger spilling over. Explain how our child doesn't even look like me. How you've been lying to me this whole time. Tears filled my eyes. It's not what you think, Jack. Please don't. He held up a hand, his face twisted with pain. Don't you dare lie to me again. I've been faithful to you, Monica. I've loved you. I fought for us, for this family, and this is how you repay me. Each word cut deeper, a sharp reminder of my betrayal. I wanted to tell him everything about Henry, Daniel, and Theo, about the loneliness, the mistakes I had made. But the words wouldn't come. I'm so sorry. I choked out. Jack laughed bitterly. Sorry? You think sorry fixes this? He paced across the room, running his hands through his hair. Tell me, Monica, who is he? Who's the father? I flinched, feeling my heart twist painfully. I don't know. The look of disgust on Jack's face made me wish I could disappear. You don't know, he scoffed. Of course you don't. How many, Monica? How many men did you let into our lives while I was gone? Jack, please. He cut me off, his voice cold and final. I don't want to hear it. I can't even look at you right now. He turned back to the window, his shoulders tense, his back rigid. I sat there cradling my child, my Astra's child, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. A nurse entered then, oblivious to the tension thick in the room. She smiled, asking if we had decided on a name. Jack let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Why don't you ask her? He replied, jerking his thumb in my direction. I'm sure she has a whole list of potential names. One for every man she's been with, the nurse's smile faltered, her eyes flickering uncomfortably between us. I'll come back later, she murmured, quickly retreating. Once the door clicked shut, Jack turned back to me. His eyes red-rimmed, his jaw clenched tight. I want a divorce, he said, his voice flat and void of emotion. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Jack, no. Please, we can work this out. I love you. The words escaped me, a desperate attempt to salvage something from the ruin. Don't, Jack's voice cracked, raw with emotion. Don't say you love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. I grasped at straws, searching for anything that might bridge the chasm between us. Maybe it's not what we think. I have a distant relative. Stop it, Monica. Jack's voice sliced through my weak deception. Sharp and cutting. Don't insult my intelligence. I know our family history, and there's no such relative. He moved to the door, his hand pausing on the handle. When you leave the hospital, don't come home. You can send someone to get your things, but I don't want to see you again. Jack, please, I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. What about the baby? He glanced at the child in my arms, a mixture of pain and disgust flickering across his face. That's not my child, Monica. You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with it. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the consequences of my choices. I looked down at the innocent face of my newborn, feeling the weight of my mistakes pressed down on me. The room, once warm and promising, now felt cold and suffocating. I knew that outside these walls, my life as I knew it was over. The community I'd been part of, the friends I'd made, they would all turn their backs on me when the truth surfaced. I held my baby close, my tears landing softly on the child's delicate skin. I'm so sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I stared at the small bundle in my arms, my heart a raging storm of emotions. The raw, searing pain of labor still throbbed through my body, but it was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. 15 grueling hours of agony had led to this moment, and I felt woefully unprepared to face the consequences. Jack stood by the window, his shoulders tense, his back to me. The silence was heavy, broken only by the innocent coos of our newborn. Our newborn. The words felt like bitter ash on my tongue, coated with guilt and regret. Jack, I whispered, my voice hoarse and raw. Jack, please look at me. My words scraped painfully against my throat. A desperate plea. Agonizingly, he turned, his face a mask of hurt and betrayal. His eyes, once filled with warmth, flickered coldly between me and the baby. I saw the moment he realized the truth, the shock spreading across his features like a dark storm cloud. Monica, he whispered, disbelief heavy in his tone. What have you done? I clutched the baby closer, as though I could shield us both from the storm that was brewing. The soft warmth of the infant against me contrasted with the icy chill settling deep in my bones. Jack, I can explain. I began, knowing full well that no explanation could ever truly suffice. Explain. His voice rose, anger seeping through the cracks of his calm exterior. Explain how this child is clearly not mine. How you've been lying to me this entire time, building our life on a foundation of betrayal. Tears blurred my vision. It's not what you think, I stammered, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Don't. He held up a hand, his face contorted with the pain I knew I had caused. Don't you dare lie to me again. I was faithful to you, Monica, and I loved you with every fiber of my being. I fought for our country, risked my life, all while believing I had someone loyal waiting for me at home. And this is how you repay me? His words hit deep, each one a knife twisting in my heart. I wanted to tell him everything about Henry's gentle presence, Daniel's passionate embraces, Theo's comforting support. I wanted to explain the loneliness, the mistakes I made in my weakest moments. But the words wouldn't come, trapped behind walls of shame and regret. "I'm sorry," I choked out, knowing how painfully inadequate it sounded. Jack let out a bitter laugh, void of any humor. "Saldi, you think sorry is going to fix this? Do you think it erases what you've done?" He paced the room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, frustration etched into every line of his face. "Tell me, Monica, who is he? Who's the father of this child?" I flinched at the question, shrinking back into the hospital bed. I don't know. I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. The look of disgust that crossed Jack's face made me wish I could disappear. "You don't know? Of course you don't. How many, Monica? How many men were there while I was away? Fighting for us. Jack, please," I begged, desperate to stem the flow of accusations, even though I knew I deserved every one of them. "No," he cut me off, his voice cold and final, like the slamming of a door. "I don't want to hear it. I can't even look at you right now. The sight of you, it makes me sick." Jack turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid, tension radiating off him as he left me to stare at his back once more. I sat there, cradling my child, my asterisk child, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, threatening to crush me beneath it. When I left the hospital, clutching my newborn tightly to my chest, Jack's words echoed in my mind. Each syllable was like a knife twisting in my heart. My parents walked beside me. Their face is a mix of disappointment and concern. I couldn't bring myself to meet their eyes. The drive to what had once been my home was silent, save for the baby's occasional whimpers. I stared out the window, watching familiar streets blur by, wondering how things had gone so horribly wrong. As we pulled up to the house, I saw Jack's silhouette in the doorway. My heart clenched. He didn't move as we approached, his gaze fixed somewhere just above my head. "Jack, I started, but he cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Just get your things and go," he said, his voice flat and cold. I swallowed hard and nodded. My mom took the baby while I walked into the house that no longer felt like home. Jack followed, his presence looming like a dark storm cloud. Every item I touched felt weighted with memories. The framed photo from our wedding day, the throw blanket we'd used on countless movie nights, the mug he'd bought me on our honeymoon, each one a reminder of the life I'd shattered. "Did you bring them here?" Jack's voice startled me. I turned to see him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, his expression cold. "What?" "In our bed," he asked, his tone laced with disgust. "Did you bring them here?" I shook my head, tears welling up. "No, Jack, never here." He let out a bitter laugh. "I guess that's supposed to make me feel better." I didn't answer. What could I say? Instead, I kept packing, my hands trembling as I folded clothes and gathered my things. As I zipped up the last suitcase, Jack spoke again, his words soft but piercing. "I trusted you, Monica. I loved you, and this is how you repaid me." I looked up, desperately searching his face for any hint of the man I'd married. But all I saw was a stranger staring back, his eyes filled with contempt. The warmth I had once known in him was gone. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I know it doesn't change anything, but Yamzul, Zusori." He didn't respond, only watched as I dragged my bags out to my parents' waiting car. As I strapped the baby into the car seat, I heard the front door slam behind me. It was over. The next few days passed in a daze. I stayed at my parents' house, going through the motions of caring for the baby, all while trying to figure out what to do next. I knew I had to face Henry, Daniel, and Theo. They deserved the truth. I met with Henry first at his cafe after closing. He listened silently as I told him everything, his face expressionless. "So you don't know which of us is the father," he said when I finished. I shook my head. "I'm sorry, Henry. I know this isn't fair to any of you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, it's not. But what's done is done. I'll help financially for the kid's sake. But us? We're done, Monica." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. At least Henry was willing to help, even if only financially. Next was Daniel. I found him at his usual spot in the park, smoking a cigarette. "Hey, Monica," he greeted, his eyes scanning over me. "You look like hell." I laughed weakly. "Yeah, well, having a baby will do that to you." His eyebrows shot up. "A baby?" His expression turned serious. "You're serious?" I told him everything. By the time I finished, he was on his third cigarette. "Damn, Monica," he muttered, This is heavy, I know. I'm sorry to dump this on you. He shrugged, not like I can do anything about it now. Look, I'm not cut out for the dad thing. I think it's best if I just bow out. I wasn't surprised. Daniel had always been a drifter, but still his words stung. I understand, he said softly. Take care, Daniel. He nodded, already turning away. I watched him go, feeling another piece of my old life slip away. Theo was the hardest. He was so young, so earnest. When I told him, his face crumpled. But I thought we had something special. He said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Theo. I never meant to hurt you. He shook his head, tears shining in his eyes. I can't do this, Monica. I'm not ready to be a father. I need to move on. As I watched him walk away, the full weight of my actions crashed down on me. I had destroyed so many lives, including my own. The following weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless days. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the whispers and judgmental stares. But even there, I couldn't escape the consequences of my choices. One day, while shopping for groceries, I saw Jack. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, laughing at something she'd said. When he noticed me, his smile vanished, his gaze flickering to the baby in my arms before shifting back to me. The contempt in his eyes was unmistakable. I hurried past them, cheeks burning with shame. As I turned the corner, I heard the woman ask, "Who was that?" "Nobody," Jack replied, his voice drifting down the aisle. "Just somebody I used to know." Those words echoed in my mind as I finished shopping, as I drove home, and as I put the baby down for a nap. Just somebody he used to know. That's all I was now. I had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when trust is broken and hearts are betrayed. That evening, as I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment watching the sunset, I thought about how drastically my life had changed. The dreams I once held, the future I had envisioned with Jack, all of it was gone. And for what? A few fleeting moments of excitement, a temporary escape from the loneliness that had weighed on me. I looked down at my child, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the turmoil that had marked their arrival into this world. Despite everything, a fierce love filled me as I gazed at this tiny, innocent being. They were my responsibility now, my reason to keep moving forward. The road ahead would be hard. The whispers would follow me. The judgmental glances would continue. And Jack's cold, detached gaze would haunt me. But for my child's sake, I knew I had to find a way forward. I had to build a new life, no matter how many pieces I had to pick up from the ashes of the one I destroyed. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I made a silent promise to my baby. I would do better. I would be better. It was too late to erase the mistakes of my past. But maybe, just maybe, I could create a future worth living. For them and for myself, I could forge a path towards something more, something meaningful, a future I would be proud to call my own. Story 2, honey, we need to have a serious conversation. Those words echoed in my mind, making me reflect on how many men have felt a similar sinking sensation. Countless relationships and dreams have been shattered by such simple phrases. Lost in my thoughts, I absent-mindedly responded to my wife of 14 years, Debbie, as she stepped into our home. Her appearance surprised me, but even more striking was the young man standing beside her. And who is this young man? I asked, curiosity mixed with concern. Debbie hesitated for a moment, her voice trembling slightly as she replied, "Charlie, this is Michael, and he's the reason I wanted to talk to you." I stood up and glanced between them, taking in my beautiful 36-year-old partner, next to a rather handsome young man, who appeared to be no more than 23. The situation didn't seem promising. While Debbie wore a serious expression, Michael was smiling, though it felt more like a smirk. He seemed quite pleased with himself, perhaps for good reason, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. I turned to Debbie and asked about him. She cleared her throat, attempting to mask her nervousness. "Charlie, you've probably noticed that our intimate moments haven't been very fulfilling lately, right? I can't believe you'd say something like that." "Debbie," I pleaded, "let's not turn this into an argument." "Charlie," she insisted, "we both know our intimate moments have lacked excitement recently. Are you saying we haven't had enough excitement?" I questioned. "What do you mean by a lack of excitement?" "I mean, darling, maybe I'm not having all my needs met." She explained gently. "Where did you get that idea, Debbie?" I countered, "Considering you've been turning me down for the past 6 weeks, I don't understand how you can claim things haven't been satisfying At least my wife seemed a little uncomfortable, seeking solace in Michael's presence. "Listen, Charlie," Michael said, his voice strained. "Debbie is trying to say that, and you don't know me well enough to speak like that. Please address me as Mr. Martin." I interrupted firmly. Michael stood there, his face turning a striking shade of crimson. He realized I had momentarily outmatched him, earning a point in my favor, but I sensed that the tides could turn quickly. "Let me handle this, Michael." My wife intervened, stopping him from making any hasty decisions. "Look, Charlie, it's not that I don't still have feelings for you. I care about you deeply, and I can't imagine my life without you. So you're suggesting you've developed feelings for someone else?" I asked, trying to grasp the situation. "Not quite," she admitted. "At least not entirely," she added, hoping I would understand. I encouraged her to continue. "I don't want anything to change between us, honey. I still love you as deeply as I did on the day we made our vows. But, Charlie, I've experienced a level of personal growth that goes beyond yours. I just need some space to explore and discover who I am," she explained, pausing to give me a reassuring smile, hoping for my understanding. "When you say, discover yourself, Debbie," I replied cautiously, acknowledging her feelings, "are you referring to the freedom to connect with someone like Michael?" I intentionally used that name to provoke a reaction from him, who managed to suppress his irritation as he grasped my intention. "Please, let's keep our conversation respectful." Debbie admonished me, disapproving of my choice of words. "It's quite inappropriate for someone in your position. I expected you to grasp my feelings better. Then how would you describe it, Debbie?" I asked, trying to gain a clearer understanding. "And of her perspective, this is a meaningful connection, essential for my personal growth," she explained. "Are you suggesting a relationship in which you become close to another person while still being committed to me?" I inquired. Debbie frowned and sighed heavily, regarding me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Charlie, you're not making this easy for me," she said. I quietly expressed my remorse. "I don't want to hinder your journey." "As you seek your own path," I said, attempting to be diplomatic. She responded with reassurances, accepting my apologies graciously, but I couldn't help but notice that Debbie still hadn't articulated her desires clearly, prompting me to remind her of that fact. This comment seemed to catch her off guard. "Please tell me exactly what you want, Debbie," I insisted. They exchanged whispered words, indicating that the conversation was not unfolding as they had anticipated. In the end, Michael nudged Debbie to continue, revealing that he didn't wish to address me as Mr. Martin. "Charlie, here's what I was thinking. We can continue our happy life together, but I also want to be able to go on dates with Michael a couple of times a week. Don't worry, darling. You probably won't even notice the difference," Debbie explained. "Do you genuinely believe this is a good idea for us?" Debbie asked. "Yes, dear. I truly think it will work out. Michael and I have discussed everything and made plans. I may not be around in the evenings, but I'll always be back for breakfast." She assured me, "This is quite interesting, especially since I've always cooked breakfast. And then you could find your way." I started, "Well, yes, I agree." My wife interjected with Michael's encouragement. "Oh, and of course yours too, Charlie. Then I will definitely be able to expand my horizons, as I've always wanted to." "What an unusual idea," I replied, nodding my head in famed understanding of the proposal. "So we will carry on as we have for the last 6 weeks, without any intimacy between us. Meanwhile, Michael will spend time with you a few times a week," I summarized. Debbie appeared disheartened, and her companion clenched and unclenched his fists in frustration. "Please, Charlie, can't you stop being difficult?" she pleaded, extending her arms and walking toward me. I held up my hand to stop her, glancing at Michael. "Is this acceptable to you, Michael? Do you mind if your girlfriend and I share some moments together occasionally?" I asked. Michael smirked confidently, clearly believing they had the upper hand. "Feel free to do whatever you want with Debbie. But trust me, she won't find as much joy in it as she does with me," he joked. Debbie attempted to intervene, asking him to be quiet, but his inflated ego kept him going. "She probably won't even notice you after being with someone like me," he boasted. Curious, I turned to Debbie. "Do you agree with that, Debbie?" "That Michael is better at pleasing you?" asked. She quickly denied it. I assure you, I've never said anything like that to him. He's just making it up. He's a foolish man. In bed, he's not much different from you. Perhaps a bit rougher, but it's just a different experience. I decided to let them pause for a moment before adding, "It's interesting that Linda actually mentioned that." My comment caught them off guard. Debbie stood there, utterly stunned, her mouth agape, while Michael rushed forward, raising his fist in anger. "Don't drag Linda into this, you pathetic guy," he shouted angrily. "I'm sorry, but your wife Linda is already part of the situation," I replied, relishing the moment. When he approached me threateningly, fists clenched, Debbie quickly stepped in to restrain him. "Please, Michael, don't," she pleaded. In response, he exclaimed, "I will take care of the scoundrel," gripping his fists tightly, she responded. "Michael, trust me. If you hit him, you'll regret it." She was right, even though he was 15 years younger and likely more athletic. I had built my position as a construction company owner through sheer determination and hard work. Over the years, I had learned how to protect myself from the toughest individuals in the industry. He hesitated, weighing his options. What a pity, but maybe there will be another opportunity. "Why are you involving Michael's wife in this?" My loving wife, Debbie, finally questioned me. "There's no need to bring her into it." I reassured her. Actually, she was the one who reached out to me a month ago and revealed the truth about your affair. Debbie looked surprised while Michael appeared, completely taken aback. "I had no idea," he muttered, and it was becoming increasingly satisfying. The score felt like it was 2-0 in our favor. The tension hung thick as we stood in silence, each of us silently daring the other to speak first. Finally, Debbie couldn't hold back. "Charlie, are you seriously admitting to me that you had a relationship with Linda?" She asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. "If you're asking whether I was intimate with her, I'd be happy to confirm that. So yes, it began about 4 weeks ago, as a way to get back at you. But I'm glad to say it evolved into something much deeper." "You're lying," she shot back. "You're a despicable person," Michael chimed in. "My wife would never be with anyone but me, especially not an older man like you." I raised an eyebrow, looking at Debbie, who seemed very upset. Since we were roughly the same age, what did Michael's words imply about her? I decided to intervene. "Do you want proof, Michael?" I teased. "Should I describe her unique rose tattoo and its location? Or would you prefer to hear how she sounds?" If looks could kill, I would have been done for. In that moment, he realized I not only knew his attractive and alluring 21-year-old wife intimately, but had also shared meaningful moments with her. "You're lying," he insisted. "Linda wouldn't do that, not for you." But I managed to convince her that it could be enjoyable. I teased. "She likes it. You should have spent more time exploring with her, instead of focusing on my wife." He yelled, filled with anger as he forcefully pulled Debbie's hand away from him. "I'm leaving," he declared, trying to assert his dominance over Debbie. "Hold on, Michael," I interrupted, pulling a key from my pocket. "If you don't have a key like this, you won't be able to enter the house." "I have my own key, you foolish fool," he retorted, clearly frustrated. "Not one like this," I replied calmly. "We changed the locks in your house." It was evident that Michael's confidence was waning. "I'm already on my way out," I stated cheerfully, finally making my presence known. "If you ever need to reach me, you know where to find me." "But what about your belongings, Charlie?" Debbie exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. "You can't just leave me like this, darling." "Oh, but I can," I reassured her. "Everything I need from this house is either already at Linda's or packed in my car. Perhaps this will give you some space to grow." Debbie quickly scanned the room, searching for a solution. Tears began to stream down her face, and she desperately attempted to embrace me. But I gently held her back and calmly assured her that she could keep the house and the car. I mentioned that my lawyer would be in touch regarding all other matters. She sobbed, asking how she would manage without me. I softly reminded her of her part-time job and suggested that Michael could support her, though it might not be easy since Linda's father planned to let him go the following morning. As I left the house, I noted a stark change in their demeanor compared to how things had been just half an hour earlier. I called out to Michael, thanking him for our encounter. Debbie echoed this sentiment, expressing her gratitude and the enjoyment of our acquaintance. However, the mood shifted dramatically. "The game is over," I said without looking back. I closed the door behind me and walked down the path to my car, hearing the echoes of their heated arguments and anguished cries. Deep down, I recognized that ending my relationship with Debbie would come at a significant cost, possibly around $100,000. However, this was not the first instance of her betrayal, and my feelings for her had completely diminished. Moreover, the prospect of trading in a well-maintained 36-year-old vehicle along with $100,000 for a pristine 21-year-old model with low mileage seemed like a favorable exchange. It was amusing to think about how she had fallen for me, with her wealthy father adding to the equation.